afternoon, everyone. Welcome once again. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining us for the Pacific Division Sheltering Capacity Building Series. My name is Yi Wei. I am a volunteer and I will be your host for the Division Series. This series is brought to you by the Pacific Division Sheltering Leadership Group. And it's going to be recorded. It's a weekly session. All the slides and material will be posted on YouTube along with a link that was sent out to you initially for the reminder emails. Or your mic and your camera has been disabled for the time being, you're able to use the chat to introduce yourself, tell us which region you're from and your name, and say hi to each other. You're also able to use the Q&A section to ask your questions, and we'll take all the questions towards the end. So over the weekend, the Pacific Division has the privilege to attend the first National Household Pet Workshops that was going to be hosted across the nation. And Pacific Division was the first to take the training over the weekend. So we are very excited to share with you what we've learned and our takeaways from the program. And given that the program is a new program and we're just starting, there might be a lot of questions that might go unanswered. We might have additional informations coming out. We ask for flexibility. We ask for your patience. We're going to do the best to answer your questions. And if we're not able to answer any of your questions, we'll take it. We'll pass along to national headquarters and we'll get it answered back to you. So with that being said, let's welcome Renee and Vicky. Renee is a volunteer from the SoCal region. She is a shelter manager and she's one of the person that had attended the household pet training this past weekend. Vicky is from the Central California region. She is our direct services manager. She is also one of the few that attended the household program, pet program. I do see several people on the chat that they also attended. So feel free to chime in the chat if there's anything else that you want to share with the group. And with that, let me turn to Renee and Vicky.
So Renee Sable here. I've been with Red Cross for 6 years, 4 years in sheltering, and it's my pleasure to present along with Vicky. Vicky, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Vicky Balmas. I have been with the Red Cross for a total of 28 years, 22 as a volunteer, and then the last 6 years as a staff member.
Okay, so Iwei, if we could get started. Next slide, please. So the agenda today is why is pet sheltering so important? Doctrine summary, sheltering models, household pets and other animals, animal care basics, regional readiness, people, places, and things, next steps, and of course, question and answers. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Renee, do you see the next slide? It's currently saying Red Cross Pet Sheltering.
Yes, Red Cross. Yes, I do now. Thank you. So Red Cross Pet Sheltering, there is a change in the long-standing Red Cross policy. Previously, as you can see from very familiar sign that we used to post in our shelters, household pets were not allowed at shelters. Service animals are always allowed. But as of 2022, the Doctrine Bulletin, Household Pets at Shelters, we began the journey of accepting pets in the shelters. And we're going to share with you today our progress and what we learned over the weekend. So why is it important? Hurricane Katrina in August 2005 was a Category 5 hurricane. The hardest hit was New Orleans and the surrounding areas. 80% of the city flooded, also devastated Mississippi and Alabama coast. There were 1,392 fatalities, and it was estimated $186.3 billion and 22 US dollars in damage. Why is it important? Hurricane Katrina, over 150,000 pet fatalities. The tragedy highlighted the lack of evacuation planning for animals. A 2006 poll said that 44% of people who chose not to evacuate did so because of their companion animals. And for everyone who works in shelters, we're familiar with all the folks in their cars in the parking lot, in the heat and the smoke. So this rings true. We're all aware of this. Next slide, please. Still not see. Okay. After Hurricane Katrina, there was growing recognition of cascading impacts of lack of support for household pets in shelters. As a result, in 2006, the Pet Evacuation and Transportation Standards Act was passed, and it requires states, cities, and counties to consider the needs of people with pets and service animals during disasters. Required to include pets in emergency planning and training, and authorizes the use of federal funds for pet-friendly shelters. So what are the risks of excluding pets in emergency response plans? People will fail to comply with evacuation orders. They'll remain in unsafe conditions. It exacerbates feelings of loss and helplessness and invites risk-taking and self-rescue of animals, meaning people go back home to rescue pets even though conditions are unsafe, and first responders are having to rescue both animals and people left at home.
Renee, are you seeing a delay of the slides? I advanced it already.
I am. No. I'm not on the next slide yet. Oh, okay. Why is Red Cross changing pet sheltering policy now? The rising number of natural disasters, acute to chronic disaster response, and we're all familiar that we're in disaster response 12 months of the year now. There's a surge in pet ownership. More than 60% of US households have pets, and many households have multiple pets and kinds of animals. The predominant belief is that pets are family, 96% of households. This is a predominant belief. Pet sheltering doctrine. When displaced by disaster, community members with pets should feel welcome seeking shelter from the Red Cross, and that Red Cross shelters will provide a safe refuge for them and their household pets. The Red Cross will co-locate household pets at its shelters whenever possible. So expanding our shelter model to include the following. Congregate shelter where only service animals are allowed was the traditional model. The new model is a co-located shelter where pets are in a separate area but near owners. It's ideal in our goal scenario. That's what we're shooting for. A cohabitated shelter is that pets are housed with their owners in the dormitory area, but under this model, the DRO director must recommend cohabitated sheltering and the National AD of Operations must approve it. This is not a decision made locally. It needs to be approved at the national level. Safety priorities. We'll start the discussion there as far as the shelters go. The first you must keep yourself safe, your team, other people, and then animals are next in line as far as safety is concerned. So you need to keep this front of mind that first it's you, then it's your team, then it's other people, and then it's the animals. What is a household pet? Household pets or companion animals are animals commonly housed inside homes for pleasure, not for commercial or agricultural purposes. Typically, they're cats, dogs, birds, hamsters, guinea pigs, fish, turtles. This is the FEMA definition. What is not a household pet? Animals typically not kept inside a home or that may be used for commercial purposes, large animals and livestock. Typically, these are horses, cows, goats, pigs, alpacas, llamas, and other farm animals. These would be taken care of at large animal shelters, which are stood up to provide emergency sheltering needs for farm or large animals at perhaps hobby farms, often at local fairgrounds. May also have smaller farm animals like chicken, ducks, etc. I'm still seeing the last slide, ducks, etc.
Renee, I'm not sure if it's the internet. The slides has already
Okay.
been advanced.
Okay, I'm there. Other household animals in a shelter. Service animals, emotional support animals or ESAs, and therapy dogs. And this particular picture, this particular sweetheart, client Chris Long's service dog Diesel at the Red Cross shelter in Texas, from what I understand from Vicki, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vicki, this particular dog saved someone's life who was having a heart attack.
It's so yeah, his handler, Chris, was at the shelter with Diesel, and he had a stroke, and Diesel alerted the Red Cross workers, and so they were able to get him medical care very quickly. It just highlights the importance of service dogs in their lives.
Very nice. Next slide, please. Service animals are not pets. Defined in the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act, only dogs or miniature horses. They are individually trained to perform specific tasks to aid an individual with a disability. Those might be physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disabilities. They are always allowed in all areas of the shelter. No license, registration, certification, or branding required. We can only ask the handler 2 questions regarding service animals. One, is this a service animal? Is this a service animal required because of a disability? And if yes, what task has it been trained to perform? As a result, the shelter team action would be to engage disaster disability integration and/or IDC as needed, whether individual disaster care, which would include disaster health services, disaster mental health, or disaster spiritual care, should they need any assistance. Emotional support animals, or ESAs. They provide emotional support to a person with a disability to assist them in managing symptoms, not individually trained to do tasks, also referred to as comfort animals or support animals. They can be medically prescribed, and they're not covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The shelter team action would be to accommodate as a pet and engage IDC as needed. I'm sorry for the delay. I don't see it yet. Therapy dogs, trained to provide affection, comfort, and support to people usually in congregate settings. They're trained to interact with all kinds of people, not just their handlers. They are not covered under the Americans with Disability Act. They are certified and registered with an organization. So the shelter team action would be to accommodate as a pet, and requests for pet therapy should go through the IDC or staff services. So, summary of other household animals in a shelter. Service animals. The shelter team action is to engage disaster disability integration and or IDC as needed. Emotional support animals. The shelter team action is to accommodate as a pet, engage IDC as needed. And therapy dogs also accommodate as a pet and request through IDC or staff services. Animal care in shelters. Owners are responsible for daily animal care, including feeding, exercise, administering meds, cleanup, etc. Animals must remain crated while in the shelter, not running loose, and not in the dormitory or meal area. A pro tip that was extended to us this weekend was to appoint a pet shelter rep to keep an eye on the pet situation. This wouldn't be their only duties, but it might be an essay, and every now and then you might ask them to just go over and check out what's going on with where the animals are. So it's not, again, not a formal position, just someone at the shelter who makes a point to check in on the animals and report to the shelter manager what the pet's needs are.
Renee, can I jump in for a sec real quick?
Yes, please.
Just want to, and can you go back, Yue? Thank you. Just want to clarify. I realize I should have said pets in that second point. So it's owners are responsible for the daily animal care, which is true of both pets and also service animals. But specifically, it's pets that must remain crated while in the shelter. Service animals do not need to be in a crate. So I just wanted to clarify because I didn't make that clear.
Thanks, Vicki. Sorry, I didn't catch that. Good job. So animal care and shelters. The DRO Pet Liaison coordinates and convenes resources. AHJ is a new term we're all going to become familiar with and love, which is the agency having jurisdiction, supports with the subject matter expertise, supplies, personnel, activation of vet team or veterinary resources. Other government and non-government partners may also be engaged to support pet sheltering with personnel and or supplies. Next slide, please. Interweb's being crazy today. So what we would like to share and really, really bring to your attention is that shelter workers do not handle the animals. Red Crossers do not directly engage with animals in our shelter. No petting, walking, offering treats, hugging, kissing, etc., anything like that. Pets belong to a specific owner and are considered property by law. It's important to respect the bond between owner and pet. Pets should be housed in a separate location from the dormitory unless it's a cohabitated shelter. Service animals are always permitted everywhere the public is allowed in the shelter with no restrictions. So during registration, people show up with their pets and they've got to, get registered into SCIA, and it might be a little distracting for them to manage their pet and go through all the formalities of registering. You want to take note of any special needs that both humans and the animals may have at that time, and SCIA will allow you to make note of that. A suggestion was made to keep 2 large crates in the registration area to assist owners during registration. That way they can put the pet away and the pet's in a calm place, and they're not trying to wrangle their pet into being quiet and calm in a truly chaotic situation. You always want to look for hazards and plan solutions. Things to look out for is hot asphalt for walks, environmental safety, heat and air conditioning issues, escape routes, etc. Maintain cleanliness in the shelter. Protect the floors and walls. And this is really important. Everyone is welcome. Do not turn anyone away. If you don't have at that particular moment when the boa constrictor comes in, a method for taking care of said boa constrictor or miniature pig or whatever it happens to be, make them comfortable, put them somewhere separate where they can be comfortable until we figure out where is going to be the best place to accommodate them. We also recommending signage for the rules of the pet area, marking the dog walking area, and entrance and exit signs for people with pets, our pet owner, the expectations of our pet owners, hours of operation for visiting and care hours, contact information, who they can contact if they have questions, reunification information, what organization is responsible for that, where people should take loose or abandoned animals, and what other various services are available, grooming, veterinary, etc.
All right, I'm going to jump in here. Thank you, Renee. The Red Cross Household Pet Program is fairly new. It's still, in many ways, being developed or rolling out, maybe is the way to put it. But there's sort of two main focuses of the program. So one is the disaster response aspect, what we actually do during the disaster. And then the other is the regional readiness and kind of readiness in general, preparing for being able to respond and to shelter pets. So in this presentation, we're going to be focusing primarily on these readiness activities, things that we can do to prepare during, what you used to call, blue sky or steady state, non-disaster time, so that we are ready during disaster time. We will talk a little bit about pet sheltering activities during disasters, disaster response activities as well. But the primary focus for this presentation is going to be on the regional readiness side. So again, the goals of the program with regards to disaster response are to really bring clarity around the roles and around the expectations that we should have as Red Crossers and that the community should have for us as Red Cross about pet sheltering during a disaster response. We're also really going to be focusing on building awareness about the various external stakeholders that we'll be working with during responses and the resources that they can bring to the table. All sorts of resources, including material and also personnel and other relationships as well. And then also, finally, there is a new position called the DRO Pet Liaison, which again, we'll talk a little bit about today. And so one of the focuses on the disaster response side of the program is empowering Red Crossers to become trained, do additional training, it's going to be a specialty track, I believe, and deploy as pet liaisons. And I say when training is available because it is not currently widely available, but it will be rolling out. So we'll talk more about that later. Okay. So I just want to highlight that the planning for around pet sheltering should really begin at the regional level. So that's why we're talking about regional readiness throughout. So the regional leadership should be driving the alignment of the region on the objectives, roles, and actions that are going to be taken within that region. And this process should really be led by your regional disaster officer, RDO. And with input, of course, from other people like regional staff members and regional volunteers like regional program leads. Various people will be involved in that planning process, and you can get involved in that planning process often as well. But it really should be something that's coming down from the region and then kind of going out into the chapters and the chapters will be following the direction set by the region around pet sheltering. So the regions are responsible for this deliberate planning, focusing on things like how to best support the household pet program and readiness related to that. be focusing on determining the agencies that have jurisdiction or agencies having jurisdiction, the AHJs, and all of the different parts of that region. And this is specifically having jurisdiction over animals, um, and also kind of learning what those agencies' disaster response plans are. Because like Renee was saying, they legally are required, each state, county, city, et cetera, are required to include planning around pets in their disaster response plans. So learning what those agencies' disaster response plans are, and then how we can work with those and work with the agency to make that happen. So we're going to be establishing collaboration, and figuring out what the expectations are for both us and them for supporting animal care at Red Cross shelters. And then in addition to these agencies having jurisdiction, these governmental agencies, which are often, by the way, the local animal control agency. And if you want to kind of figure out how to figure out what the agency is in your area, at the training this weekend, they suggested like who can write a ticket to a pet owner. That's usually the agency that has jurisdiction. So often it's animal control, but it may be different in your local area. So in addition to identifying those agencies and working with them, we'll be also identifying and connecting with local non-governmental organizations like NGOs, animal welfare organizations, things like that. And the planning assumptions that we should bring to the table when thinking about animal and pet sheltering. Well, first of all, it's going to be the same type of planning assumptions that we bring when we're trying to figure out how to prepare for sheltering humans. So thinking about how many people or how many animals we can accommodate in a specific site, how many blankets, crates in this case, actually not cots, and food, things like that. What should we assume that we need to have on hand or get when the disaster hits? So the other kind of planning assumptions that they want us to have are planning for 50% of our sheltered clients to be pet owners with at least one household pet, and often they have more than one. So kind of preparing for that. The FEMA planning assumptions around the composition of these animals is that the typical household pet composition is 60% dogs, 30% cats, and 10% other animals, like the boa constrictor that was mentioned. But it's strongly suggested that as part of your readiness activities, you in your region research the local pet demographics and see if there's anything specific about your area. Do they tend to have more animals than other areas or fewer animals? Do they have different types? Are they more, large animals? Is there a lot of, backyard chickens and things like that? So just kind of figuring out what's happening in your particular area around the demographics. They also want us to plan for at least 50% of our Red Cross shelters, Red Cross run shelters, having a co-located pet shelter, which again, co-located is the goal. That is the ideal model of sheltering if you're going to have a pet shelter. So that's the type where they are nearby, but not in the same exact room, same space as the humans. They're not in the dormitory, but they are they're close enough for their owners to check on them regularly and take care of them. And then just sort of the broader point that caring for pets at shelters requires a whole community approach. And so DROs will be allocated resources, for example, financial resources, to help achieve the outcomes of accommodating pets at our shelters. So as part of this regional readiness, is really working to identify the best practices for that region to support co-located and, if necessary, and again, if approved, cohabitated shelters. So we're going to talk about people, places, and things in terms of our regional readiness planning. So starting with people, there are a number of different Red Cross groups that should be involved in this planning, ideally, or should be involved. So our shelter workers, our shelter teams, for example, SCIA includes intake of pets and information about pets. So we should be talking about that, making sure that people know what kind of information to record and making sure that they know how important it is to get that information as soon as possible when people are registering for our shelters. We also want to pull in external relations. So the different groups in external relations like government operations or GovOps, public affairs, CEP, which is community engagement and partnerships. These are really important people who will help us make those connections to both the government and non-governmental organizations that we'll be partnering with regarding pet sheltering. And of course, logistics. We're talking about stuff, a lot of stuff that we're going to be requesting, we're going to be asking for, we're going to be sometimes supplying ahead of time or getting at the time during the disaster. So we want logistics to be involved in these conversations as well. And then another Red Cross, type of person maybe is the DRO pet liaison, that position that I mentioned before. So this is or will be a specialty track. So there will be additional training required in addition to being, a shelter having some type of mostly mass care gap. You'll have to have additional training in order to act as a pet liaison. That's one of the things that we were doing in this last weekend of training. And just like any other Red Cross worker, these are not pet handlers. This is not a position where you will be, walking the dogs and petting the cats and providing treats and things like that. That's not what this position is either. But instead, they are subject matter experts on Red Cross kind of best practices around sheltering. Well, sheltering pets, I should say. Next slide. Thank you. So just kind of to continue a little bit more about this pet liaison position. It's a position that will be deployed to all level 4 and above disaster relief operations. So it's something that if you're on a larger disaster, there will be somebody in charge of this. And it's a position where they help support pet sheltering programmatically. So they will be itinerating or moving between our different service delivery sites, primarily shelter sites, be problem solving, identifying needs and reporting them to headquarters, making sure that we have eyes on what's going on the ground at our shelters with regards to pets. Working very closely with the shelter site managers and reporting directly to the headquarters mass care chief. That's kind of the line of communication. So other people involved in this kind of regional readiness are emergency management agency officials. And as we were talking before, agencies having jurisdiction, the people who work at those, who are in charge of those agencies and their responses during disaster and their planning around animals and disaster. So it's all about identifying that local agency or those agencies, building relationships with them. Again, usually it's the local animal control agency, but not always, so don't assume that it is. And again, the NGOs, non-governmental organizations, such as established animal welfare organizations. You can see here an example of the Humane Society of Missouri, Animal Cruelty Task Force, Disaster Response and Adoption Task Force that were at one of our shelters. So again, it's working about identifying these organizations during non-disaster times and building relationships. And then last but not least, there's also private businesses. So things like local groomers, veterinarians. We can also often get kind of veterinary support through the agency having jurisdiction, but it's not a bad idea to try and make other connections as well. You can talk to your local pet stores and even pet cemeteries. As you're talking about, there's 150,000 pets that unfortunately were fatalities in Hurricane Katrina. There are sometimes, you may need to have that type of resource on hand. There are things that they can help provide and help support our clients during some, the worst parts of one of the worst days of their lives if they lose a pet during a disaster. So things to keep in mind and again, people to identify and make relationships with or build relationships with during readiness periods. And then we have places. So first, we're going to think about our identified shelter sites, the places that we have shelter agreements with. Maybe the most common ones, the ones that we tend to be more likely to utilize. I don't know about you guys, but we have hundreds in the various counties, in each of the counties in my region. But there's, a handful that we tend to go back to over and over. So really identifying which of our shelter sites will allow for co-located or cohabitated shelters. So that'll involve talking with the property managers or the property owners. We have a form that's available on OneSource, a fillable PDF, which is the Pet Addendum to Facility Use Agreement. And so filling that out, and it's a good idea to do that as part of your regular updating of your shelter surveys, which are going to be available in Web EOC when that is released. So should be on your to-do at some point when we hear that it's time. And again, working with logistics, sheltering and working with logistics on updating these agreements, how that should be happening in your region or your chapter. And then once you have shelter sites identified and say you're opening a shelter, thinking about how you're going to set up the shelter space. So it's a good idea to separate species. So for example, separating the dogs from the cats from the birds, probably the birds from the snakes, things like that. It's important also to set up, think about very carefully about your flow of traffic. So it's a good idea to create aisles for traffic flow, one-way aisles. You don't want animals coming head to head in terms of contact. That's kind of not a good idea. So it's also good to have separate entrances and exits for pets, specifically for pets with their owners. So this is separate from non-pet owners so that the non-pet owners don't have to be necessarily encountering pets when they're coming in physically in and out of the shelter. And again, avoiding having that head-to-head contact so that you have a separate entrance and a separate exit for the owners with their pets. Also, think about things like creating barriers between crates. You want to kind of visually block. It's good especially for dogs, well, for cats as well. But it's good to kind of make it so that they have kind of limited vision, and they're not staring at the same animals, for days and weeks on end. Sort of lowers kind of the aggression and the tenseness of the atmosphere. So even just like having cardboard in between crates can help with that. We also want to make sure, like with all of our shelters, we want to have tarps under the crates and also on our walls. Think about if, the animal has some GI upset or is acting out and maybe spraying. We want to make sure that we're protecting the facilities and not having to pay damages for that. And you want to make sure, of course, that you identify areas for both relief, for restroom use, and also exercise. And there are accessible water sources for the animals, for the pets, all the animals. And the last couple of things that you want to look for, think about for your shelter sites is adequate ventilation. This is really important for health reasons, also for smell reasons. And also it's important to have means to regulate temperature, make sure that it is safe, comfortable temperature for the animals, just like we think about that for our humans. And excuse me, while we're talking about places for different activities and for different needs of the pets, it's also important to identify in your shelter, your co-located or cohabitated shelter, areas that pets are not allowed. So if it's a co-located shelter, they should not be in the dormitory. And again, that's the ideal co-located. We're yay co-located in the Red Cross. They shouldn't also be in the food preparation, serving or eating areas, or any other areas where you kind of identify that they would present a health hazard or disrupt our service delivery. So there should be places where people in the shelter can go to be away from other people's pets or their own pets for that matter. And finally, in terms of regional readiness, we'll talk about things. So this is really about identifying key supplies, things like crates, leashes, dishes, food dishes, litter and litter boxes, food, but we don't suggest or don't recommend that you purchase or store food in advance. That should be sort of a just-in-time thing. And also remember, we don't have to purchase any of this necessarily. This is what we should be working with our partners for identifying what they can supply and how they can support us with items. How we're going to provide water. Again, in terms of that, controlling the space and making sure that the temperature is not too hot or too cold. Thinking about finding things like industrial fans or heaters. One of the planning aspects should be determining in your region what supplies you want to procure ahead of time and sort of have on hand ready to go. Maybe just a few things so that you can utilize them at the very beginning of sheltering while you're waiting for your partners to get you more supplies. Versus things that you want to, again, like the larger amounts of supplies or things like food that you don't want to get ahead of time. So things that you're going to procure during the disaster. So identifying kind of what goes on each list. And of course, becoming familiar with your local jurisdiction's resources. What can they help us with during pet sheltering operations? Is that providing personnel? Is that materials? Like, again, those crates and leashes and dishes and food. And this should be, conversations that you're having with your local emergency management or the agency having jurisdiction. That AHJ we've been talking about. And a few additional considerations to think about in terms of this regional readiness and chapter readiness. These are things that vary based on your individual community needs and your individual demographics. So are we talking about urban places, suburban, rural? How does that affect the demographics, the needs, the population? And speaking of local population, again, how does your population look in terms of the number of households with pets? Is it more than the average, fewer than the average? And what types of animals do they tend to have? Think about also other need populations in the area, just in terms of resources and also in terms of course, intersecting needs. Are you going to have a large population of elderly clients who are going to have maybe difficulty caring for their pets in a shelter environment, right? Or large number of people who are disabled or who have other access and functional needs that may need more support around pet sheltering. And also think about kind of the resources that you can utilize, like local interest groups. So for example, dog breed organizations or dog breed clubs. They can often bring resources to bear and maybe even volunteers. So those are sort of the regional readiness kind of general activities that we recommend the region start working on. I do want to circle back and remind everybody that the Red Cross volunteers, that Red Cross staff in general, do not handle the animals. Remember, we don't touch the animals. We don't give them treats. We don't take them on walks. We don't provide in general the daily care. We don't clean dirty litter boxes or pick up dog poop or especially give medical care or advice for animals. All right. And keep in mind, this is kind of a pro tip when you're thinking about how to interact with pets at a shelter. Imagine that those pets are a family member of yours or a child even, because again, 96% of people who have pets, they are family members. Would you pick up somebody else's child? That's kind of a good way to think about how to approach working with clients and their animals. And also just want to circle back again to these shelter models. that the ideal, if we are going to have pets at a shelter, and again, not all shelters need to have a pet shelter. Remember, the goal is at least 50% of any shelters open need to have either a co-located or a cohabitated pet shelter. So that means 50%, up to 50% cannot have that. So you could have a regular congregate shelter where only service animals are allowed, but you should also have available some type of shelters with pet shelters. And again, our goal, the ideal model of this is the co-located shelter, where pets are in a separate area, but they're near owners, so that the owners can access them regularly, that the owners can take care of them multiple times a day. So, maybe in a separate building on the site of the shelter, or in even a separate room at the shelter, but they are separated. They're not in the dormitory, and that is our ideal. And if we are going to have a cohabitated shelter, where pets are actually housed in the dormitory with their owners, that does require outside of the area approval. Okay? So that is not the ideal. There are certain situations where that may happen, but it does have to get special approval, and you should work towards the co-located shelter. And we just kind of wrap up with, it may seem like a lot. This is a lot of information. Um, but keep in mind that this pet sheltering is just another service we provide, like SRT, right? This is just another way that we take care of people and families who are affected by disasters. So this process of determining, readiness plans and making these connections and building relationships and acquiring supplies, things like that, it's not going to happen overnight. This is going to be a process. It's going to happen differently. It's going to take us a while to iron out all of the kinks of this new program and to get reliable procedures in different places, or in place, I should say. Keep in mind also that every event is different, right? Every disaster is different. And every disaster will also present different challenges and therefore learning opportunities. So we will learn sort of on the ground in the process of this. So, we, in general, the Red Cross, we give you this presentation. We Pacific Division Sheltering, we don't have all the answers yet. In fact, we don't have probably many of the answers yet. Information is still kind of being developed. It's still being published. It's still coming out. But don't worry. I mean, it's going to be a learning process. We will learn from each response, and we will get better every time. And I just wanted to wrap up with kind of talking about, what is the value of having pet-friendly Red Cross shelters? There are actually quite a few positives around this. It encourages compliance with evacuation orders. As Renee was talking earlier, that survey in 2006 found that 44% of people who chose not to evacuate, follow evacuation orders in advance of Hurricane Katrina, did so specifically because of their companion animals, their pets, and not having anywhere to take them, or not thinking that they had anywhere to take them, or any way to take them. There's transportation. So planning around this and making sure that we have pet-friendly shelters available encourages people to comply with evacuation orders. And so it really is important in terms of safety. It also supports our government partners. Remember that they have to incorporate pets into their disaster planning for the Pets Act. So this is one way we can support them in making that happen. It reduces the stress for both the pets and the owners. If they can be, together nearby, they know that they're safe. They know that they have somewhere to go with their animal. It also reduces things like rescue attempts and other potentially harmful actions, right? So that's specifically owners kind of doing rescue attempts of their animals that were maybe they had to leave that home and couldn't evacuate with. It also reduces the demand on first responders who may have to go into areas to try and rescue animals or pets. It provides our clients and their animals with support from animal welfare experts during a time that's stressful for both the humans, for the clients, and also for the animals. It's a very stressful, disasters are stressful, as we all know, right? So this gives them support from people who know what they're doing with regards to animals and disasters. It helps us identify kind of immediate community needs around pets and animals and find solutions. We can anticipate roadblocks to, for example, transition and recovery obstacles. Speaking of SRT, shelter resident transition, some of those roadblocks may be around their animals and their pets. In the large picture, it enables the disaster relief operation to effectively expand their support to the entire community and helps keep the whole family together. And it also enhances the client's kind of experience of and views of the Red Cross. So, the eventual goal and the eventual response, I guess, is that families will be more likely to seek out Red Cross shelters as their preferred option in a disaster. And it saves lives. Right? So really, there are a ton of benefits to this new approach to pets at our shelters. So what's next? What are some of the action items that you can start doing? So if you are interested in being involved in this type of readiness planning, either the regional leadership aspect, I would reach out to your regional leadership to get involved in that sort of first step of the regional planning. You'll be doing things like cultivating partners in your community, emergency management, the animal welfare organizations, things like that. But again, it starts on the regional level. So you can wait until it kind of gets, the conversations start happening about your local chapter, or you can jump in and start working with your region to try and make this happen. There is only, unfortunately, one piece of doctrine that is currently published on OneSource. That is the Doctrine Bulletin, Household Pets at Shelters. It was released, I believe, in 2022, as we were talking about earlier. This is, again, the only thing that is currently published, but it is valid and has some good information, so check that out. And there's a bunch of new doctrine coming out, and it should be available by the end of the calendar year. So we will have more information, of course, when it's published. But the entire mass care toolkit is kind of undergoing a I don't know if a refresh is the right word, but anyway, it's all being kind of looked at, and as this is as the newest program, it's going to be one of the last ones to be republished or be published. So it will be available eventually. It's not available yet, so stay tuned. And related to that, if you are interested in possibly becoming a DRO pet liaison, taking that extra training and deploying to level 4+ disasters as a DRO pet liaison. Again, that training is not widely available yet, but it will be. And so keep your eyes peeled for more information about that and for opportunities. And just if you have more questions that come to you later, or you want to kind of talk to people about this, there's some more information. You can contact the National Household Pet Program. Their email is pets@redcross.org. They also hold monthly office hours. This is on the fourth Thursday of every month from 12 to 1 p.m. Pacific time. And so the upcoming office hours will be on June 27th, July 25th, August 22nd, September 26th. Again, the fourth Thursday of every month. And for the link to join that, you can email pets@redcross.org. We also have a pet champion for our division. So this is the Pacific Division pet champion is Larry Blythe. And if you have questions specifically for him, his email is here, and he's basically the person supporting our regions in this, especially the readiness aspect of preparing for implementing this household pet program. All right.
Vicki, I just want to add,
yeah.
I want to reinforce what we were told at the training, and that is that this needs to be looked at as just another service that we provide for our clients. And we don't know all of the issues that can arise because lots of situations can occur with different animals, different situations, whether it's the shelter that you're at, whether it's the event that is going on. There are a million different variables that can play into how we shelter clients with pets, whether it's cohabitated, co-located, congregate, a million different things. They impressed upon us was we're not alone when we are dealing with these unique situations and issues, that if we need help, the AHJ is the place to start for you to figure out who's really going to be responsible for taking care of pets during these situations, because we for sure don't stock tents and crates and all of these things. While we can acquire crates and things like that, and even tents in some cases, oftentimes there are organizations that will take on that responsibility and help us. And remember, this is with the state of California, it's a law now. So a lot of municipalities are really scrambling to become prepared to assist us. But what was really driven home was, whether it's the pet liaison, whether it's just local people, you have support. There will be unique situations that will arise, and we don't want you to feel that you're alone in solving these problems, because many times others have already done this and they've got a good way to work around it or to support the client or anything like that. So it was really driven home that the idea, it's brand new. We did not receive any documentation as a result of the training. It's still being created. Once they finish all the initial trainings, they'll go back and then hopefully give us some documentation. So this was put together by some of us who attended and took copious notes. I'm not one of them. Vicki took very copious notes along with a couple other people. But this is our attempt to give you as much information as possible on the subject. So I'll be quiet now.
Very well said.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Renee, for sharing the information with us. And before I open to the group, I do see some people that also attended the training. Does anyone want to come off mute and share with us your takeaways from this training? And let me just go ahead and do the modification right now so then people can come off mute. Give me 2 seconds. Okay. I'm just going to the attendee list. Let me see if anyone wants to come off mute. I'm just going to call your name and put you on the spot. Kathy Sproul, do you want to share with us anything that your takeaways from the training, that anything to add that we didn't mention yet? Kathy is on a phone, so she might not able to come off mute. Let's go to Gail. Gail Bowser, anything else you want to add from the training?
No, I don't really have anything to add. It was a really good training, though, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we implement it.
Thank you so much. Paulette, anything to add?
Hello. No, I really don't. There was a lot of information to process. So this is really great that whoever made this up to review all that stuff is really good. Thanks.
Thank you. Is Robin Bryson on the call? I saw you earlier. I'm not sure if you're still on to anything that you want to add.
Hi, Iwei.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Renee, you guys, and Vicki, you did an excellent job putting this together so fast. I was actually just waiting for the information that they're going to be sending us to, send this on and do a meeting with my chapter. So this is giving me a whole lot of information to maybe go ahead and start that with my local chapter in Gold Country. But yeah,
How's it going? Are you hoping to get your bike fixed?
the weekend was great.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Because
you guys captured this.
oh gosh,
wonderfully.
yeah, it looks like you'll need a new tire then. Yeah, just
Okay. And so you guys captured this wonderfully and perfect. So I don't really have too much to add. I just took notes of what you guys did, and I think that's it.
And Robin, that the follow-up documentation that they promised us won't be available until they finish all the training across the country, because they want to get input from the attendees. So it may be just a little bit before anything official comes out.
Oh, well, that's great to know. So then, if it's all right, I'd like to be able to borrow this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Iway said that was going to be available after the meeting. And thank you, everyone, for the good grades. We were concerned, but it was.
Thank you.
And as Robin and as other people have shared, it was a lot of information concentrated in a short period of time without any printed documentation to go along with it. So thank goodness people like Vicki and other people took very, very copious notes, because I'm not good at that. So thank goodness they did. And as a result, you see this the presentation that we put together. So thanks.
Yeah, excellent job.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for the 36 people that attended the training. I'd also like to share my takeaways and my feedbacks. I was the planner for the NHQ training, and on the logistical side, I was present, but I was not fully present, as I had other logistical things to do. And my takeaway is that there's lots going on underneath. There are so many people working on it, whether it's the NHQ household pest program, or whether it's the NHQ ops team, the operation team, or whether it's our partners, American Humane Society, or other partners. There are lots going on. And it's not just what we're seeing right now. It's much more complicated than we expect or that we see. I recognize and acknowledge the frustration that we don't have the printed documents to go off from, that we don't have a guideline or protocol on volunteer connection or on OneSource for us to reference back to. And I also want to acknowledge our skills and our experiences and our team effort. Let's just say, knock on wood, that we have a fire right now. Actually, we have multiple fires across the nation. Let's say we have a fire and we have something going on and we need a question to get answered, and it's nothing on this presentation. We do have our experience to rely back on. We do have our skills and knowledge. We also have our team. Let's say this team doesn't have any answers. We can go up, we can go across. We can call the PEST program. We can call the AHT authority has jurisdictions. We do have multiple resources that we can do. Sometimes it's easy for us to forget that. Meanwhile, in the presentation, we don't have clear answers. And in reality, we might have more resources than we think that we have. So I do ask everyone to trust your skills, to trust your team, trust that you do have someone to reach out to, and also trust that when it comes to real world situation, there's always an exception to the rules. I did see all your questions. Unfortunately, we're not able to answer all your questions. Some of them is because we don't have answers. Some of them is because it's above our pay grade, unfortunately. Some of them is really a situation-based and scenario-based and shelter-based and population-based. It really case-by-case basis. And I also recognize the NHQ is as frustrated as we are that they're not able to put everything in writing on OneSource. And by the Pacific Division for being the first division to go through these trainings, we just ended the training on Sunday. I think the NHQ team had a lot of feedbacks that they can bring back to the group and also to modify their slides and their presentations and the pace that they had for all those upcoming sessions they're going to do across the nation. So I do like to think for all the ones that attended the training that we provided a valuable experience for everyone in the future for the training and for our clients and for our workforce. Okay, let's.
I just want to add one thing, Yue.
Yes, of course.
I was absolutely one of those shelter managers that was how shall I say? I didn't know how we were going to do this because I knew there were a million different scenarios that could happen. And I was hesitant about it and things of that nature. And coming away from this weekend, they converted me and made me feel comfortable that there'll be someone there that has our back, no matter what it is and what help we need. And I'm much more comfortable with it, even though there isn't anything written down, all that stuff that I would really like. I'm much more comfortable with it and do feel as if we'll figure it out case by case, situation by situation, and they've got our back, and you will get assistance, you will get help no matter what it is. So I'm very much more comfortable with it now.
Thank you so much. And Vicki, anything to add?
I really appreciate you pointing out that the national a household pet program folks and also and the division and our partners are also frustrated about and they'd love to get this information out in writing to us sooner rather than later. So it's just there are reasons, there are kind of extenuating factors. So again, it's going to be a slow process, but we will get the information and we will be able to act on it. And it's a great time to start just thinking about making relationships and working with your region to make sure that we're as best prepared as we can be.
That's right.
Thank you so much. So we switched the order. Initially, we were going to do sheltering as a team effort this week and pets next week. We thought that would be, with all the knowledge fresh in our mind, that we like to switch the order and do this first. So next week is going to be sheltering as a team effort presented by Alan and Laura. Before we close, I know we have a lot of questions in the chat, and before we have all those things. Several things. I saw one question that if the RDO knows what's going on and if they know what roles they're playing. Currently, I would say no. There are multiple things that are in the works. So currently, we only have two terminologies that is published or that is official. One is the pet champion. Pet champion is a blue sky role or steady state role that is on the division level, which is Larry in our division. Then there is another role called DRO Pet Liaison. That is a DRO Pacific role. DRO stands for Disaster Relief Operation. So that pet liaison is going to be activated by DOC or by national headquarters. It's not going to be on every single operation. If it's a level 5 and above operation, you automatically have DRO Pet Liaison. If it's 4 and above, for 4s, you will need approvals. So for regular 1, 2, 3 levels, you will not have one automatically, you won't get one automatically. That being said, that doesn't mean that person or that you couldn't dedicate a person or someone to take care of the pet relations in a shelter or in the region. We currently do not have the talks of regional lead for pets is in the talks, but we do not have any documents to say that has not been released to the RDOs or anything to answer case question. The RDO does not really know what's going on, and NHQ is still putting that document up. One of the things that I observed myself during the training institute, and I prepped everyone that attended the training, was that please give the whole team grace. I kept seeing we or me, but more of the whole team grace, was that I do see that people were still modifying the slides as we speak, as we talk, as we were presenting, or as they were presenting, they were still tweaking the slides. Not because that they were not prepared. It was more because this is the first time that they were sharing the knowledge, and we're still doing the trial and error phase, that they're still trying to gather the feedback that most of the people, I mean, if we've ever done presentations before, after the presentation, you'll feel like, oh, I should have done this instead of that. So they're still in that stage. And that's why, during the presentations or during the weekend, we saw people, they were still modifying, they will say, well, we were originally going to do this, but let's scratch that. Because of this focus or because of this target audience group, we're going to change. And that's what they're planning to do for the 6 divisions across the nation. And we just happen to be the first. So I am hopeful and excited to see that everyone else that comes after us will have a better experience and will have a much more tailored experience that incorporate all the feedbacks that we gave to the presenters and to the national team to see how they can modify it and how they can simplify it or just more targeted to the audience and to our group and to answer all those questions. I kept saying to everyone, on this call and to the previous group is that advocate for your group. Save your questions. We might not be able to answer you right now, but that doesn't mean your question is not valid. So save your questions. Send it to Pets. I'm sorry, I forgot the email address. Pets@redcross.org. So then they can hear our feedbacks, that they can put that into doctrines and protocols that can help facilitate for our future operations. I do like to conclude this session without taking anyone off the mute or any questions, address more questions into the session in the chat, simply because some of them we really do not have answers to. And pets is a beloved topic. Pets are our family members, regardless whether we're afraid or not. We do have to recognize that those are part of families. So let's conclude here. If you have any questions, please feel free to email pets@redcross.org. If you have anything related to the division, if you'd like to get more involved in the division for the Pets Champion, not Pets Champion, but the Household Pet Program, please go ahead and email Larry. And again, this recording will be published later on tonight on YouTube. And the current slide is already in use. It's already in the reminder email. And I do like to emphasize that the slides are our feedback and our takeaways. It does not imply this is only current as of now, as of the time of presenting. And the reason is NHQ, they're still modifying it. So we're not saying that this is once and for all, this is going to get modified. This is simply the group's takeaway and our lessons learned for attending the PET program, the National Headquarters program. Thank you so much all. Have a great night. And we'll see you next week, exact same time on the exact platform. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good presentation. Bye.
Could I ask